Question 4. Reading data from a file, doing a bit of data processing on that information and outputting to screen. So here is the question, customers.txt, and we've got 4 pieces of information for each customer. Okay, first name, age, number of visits, and total spend. And total spend, being money, is going to be a double. Okay, so we need to place that in the correct place in the project and then use the skeleton code. So let me just talk about those for a second. Okay, first of all, here is our package, Christmas exam. If it's in the right place, if the text file is in the right place, we can see that using the Files tab here. And there's customers.txt at the same level as the source subfolder if you're going to Windows Explorer. Okay, so here is my data. 5 records. Okay, Jerry is the last person and Jerry's age is 45. So our skeleton code is essentially accessing the text file, storing it in a scanner object called file object called input, and our public static void main, we need to add throws input output exception. Okay, and we need those 2 imports as well. Okay, so we're getting the 4 pieces of information for each record, and we're going to store them into those variables. And then what we're going to do is we are just going to print out the age from the last record, okay, which is 45 there for Jerry. Okay, so what does our questions involve? What are we to do here? Read in the data, output neatly as a table. Include headings on the table. Okay, so headings have to be displayed before we start reading the records. And then for each record, we want to print that out practically immediately as soon as we get it, and do a little bit of number crunching. Use decimal places as appropriate. Okay, so that should start you thinking straight away, I need to use printf. Okay, for my spend by the customer. And then we've got average spend as well. Okay, so that's going to need printf to display that as well. Total number of visits for all the customers who are aged above 20. Okay, so we need to check that. We're going to have an if statement for each customer. And we need to get the number of visits from them and add that to some sort of running total. And we also have to see who has made the most visits to the shop and then store their name and age. And then finally, add 3 stars after a customer whose first name begins with J and who spent more than €50 on average. Okay, so you can see first name begins with J. We know straight away there are 3 customers, Jack, Jessica and Jerry, but we can't really tell what the average spend is for the moment. Okay, so that has to be more than 50. Okay, so let us look at the solution then. Okay, I'm going to need some extra variables, one for the average spend, part B, one for the total number of visits above 20, and which is going to be initialized to 0 in both of these cases. And then for part 4, what's the age of the person who has the most visits? What is the name of the person who has the most visits? And max visits equals -1. Okay, now there are 2 ways to kind of work out the max visits, and what they hinge upon is the very first record. Okay, the very first record, the first customer is going to have had the most number of visits. Okay, so we've a couple of ways to do that. Okay, so I'm going to show you one way at the moment. We know that the number of visits, which is the 3rd piece of information, 6, 2, 43, 3 and 6. Number of visits is always positive. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm setting max visits to -1. I'm setting it to an absurd value that I know the very first customer the number of visits is going to be greater than -1. Okay, the number of visits has to be positive. So I want this to be overwritten on the very first record. Okay, so that's something I could do. I'm also going to need a message to store my 3 asterisks if their name begins with J and their average spend is more than 50. Okay, so I'm printing out my heading line here, and you sort of have to experiment with the tabs here, really. Okay, there's no kind of hard and fast rules here. Just experiment. Okay, so you write out the heading line, and then you write out the customers inside the while loop, and then you just look at the output and see, okay, I need to put in double tap here and there or whatever. Okay, so for each record in the text file, we need input.hasNext. So input is the name of the scanner file object. .hasNext boolean. Okay, I'll come back to count++ shortly. I'm getting the 4 pieces of information from each record, and I'm storing them there. Straight away, I can work out the average spend, spend divided by visits. I don't need to cast because spend is already a double, as is the average. Okay, so that's part B. Part C, let me just do this in order. Is the customer aged greater than 20? If so, add the number of visits to the total above 20 variable that we've just declared earlier. Okay, so that's part C. That's fairly straightforward. Part D, who made the most visits? Okay, well, essentially all we need is that. I will explain this extra code shortly. Okay, so if the number of visits is greater than max visits, first time around, max visits, when we declare it and initialize it to -1, so first time around, the visits from the first customer will be greater than -1. So we will go in here. Okay, so we're recording this for the very first customer. We're storing the details. Okay, and then from then on, is the number of visits greater than max visits 6? Okay, so first time around, is Jack's number greater than -1? Yes. Okay, so we're going to store Jack's details. Second time around, is Jessica's number of visits greater than 6 this time? No, that's not true. Ezra's is 3 is not greater than 43, and so on. Okay, 6 is not greater than 43, so Ezra will win that particular accolade. Okay, and then part E, message. I need to overwrite this back to basically tempt it, because I may have written the 3 stars for the previous customer, and I may not want to do it for the succeeding customer. Okay, so I need to overwrite that, reinitialize it basically. Okay, so if their name begins with capital J and their average spend is greater than 50, which we calculate in part B, then we can set message to be that. Okay, so that's part E, and then the output is here. Okay, so name is a string, age is an integer, visits is an integer, spend and average spend are both floating point numbers, and then finally MSG, whether it is empty or triple starred. Okay, and then finally we leave the loop and we put out our kind of summary data, how many visits for those above 20, and the person who made the most visits. So let's run this. And let's see, does this make sense? Total visits for those age above 20 is 58. So Jack did 6. 43 and 6 is 49. And 3 is 52. And 6 is 58. Okay, so all except Jessica. All those visits are included in that. And Ezra made the most visits. Jack begins with J, average spend over 50. Jerry begins with J, average spend over 50. Jessica begins with J, average spend less than 50. So Jessica doesn't get the 3 stars. Okay, so let me just return now to this code here. And where is max visits? Okay, what we could do now is we could leave max visits, say, at 0. And then we could use this variable called count, which we initialize to 0. So each time we go around the loop, each time we get a record, we're going to increment count. And when count is set to 1, i.e. the first record, then we can store the max value. Okay, so if I set that to ++ there, and then I can okay, that should be it. And if I run that again, we should get exactly the same thing. Okay, so that looks like it should. 58, and Ezra wins again. Okay, so it's just another way we have to do that. So let me just talk through that just once again. Our max visits, we initialize that to 0. We use a counter variable initialized to 0. Each time around the loop, we increment the counter. So count essentially is the number of records, number of customers. Okay, if it's number 1, we are going to get all the information from the first customer and store it in those 3 variables. Okay, and otherwise, we then use that to check is the number of visits for the particular customer, is it greater than the max visits? If so, store those 3 pieces of information. Okay, so two ways to do that.